The crack of ice splitting beneath her feet was the last sound Priscilla Bennett heard before the frozen surface of the pond gave way, and she plunged into water so cold it felt like knives stabbing every inch of her skin. The shock stole the scream from her throat as she dropped through the jagged hole, her heavy wool skirts immediately soaking through and dragging her down into the black depths like an anchor determined to claim her life. December in Marfa, Texas, was usually dry and dusty, but the winter of 1883 had brought an unusual cold snap that froze the cattle pond solid, or so everyone had thought. Priscilla had been taking the shortcut across Miller's Pond to reach the general store before closing time, her mind preoccupied with the letter she needed to post to her aunt in San Antonio. At 22 years old, she had been living in Marfa for 3 years, working as a school teacher for the children of ranchers and townspeople. The pond had seemed safe, with other tracks visible on the ice, but she had not known about the spring that fed warm water into the southern edge, keeping that section dangerously thin despite the freeze. The cold was beyond anything she had ever experienced. Her lungs seized, refusing to draw breath. Her limbs went rigid and useless. The water pressed against her ears, muffling all sound except her own racing heartbeat. She could see the pale circle of daylight above her, the jagged edges of the hole she had fallen through, but her body would not obey her desperate commands to swim. The weight of her skirts and coat pulled her deeper. Darkness crept into the edges of her vision. Then she heard it, muffled and distant through the water, a tremendous splash. Someone else had entered the pond. Through her fading consciousness, she felt rather than saw a presence diving toward her. Strong hands grabbed her arms, her waist, hauling her upward with powerful strokes. Her head broke the surface and she gasped, her lungs burning as they remembered how to function. The cold air felt almost warm compared to the water, though her body shook so violently she could not control it. "I have got you," a deep voice said near her ear, breathless with exertion. "Do not fight me. Just hold on." Priscilla could not have fought if she wanted to. Her body was shutting down, every muscle trembling and weak. She felt the man dragging her through the water toward the edge of the ice, breaking through thin sections with his shoulder as he went. When they reached thicker ice, he pushed her up onto it, his hands strong and sure despite the cold that must have been affecting him too. Then he hauled himself up beside her, water streaming from his clothes. "Can you stand?" he asked, already pulling her to her feet before she could answer. "We need to get off this ice. My horse is on the bank." Priscilla tried to make her legs work, but they buckled. Without hesitation, the man swept her up into his arms and moved across the ice with careful, measured steps, testing each section before putting his full weight on it. She caught a glimpse of his face, angular and strong with dark hair plastered to his forehead, water dripping from a thick mustache. His eyes, a startling green even in the fading afternoon light, focused intently on the shore ahead. They reached solid ground and he carried her to a large bay horse that stood ground-tied nearby. With one arm still holding her, he managed to grab a blanket from his saddlebag and wrap it around her shoulders. But it was not enough. They were both soaked through, and the temperature was dropping as the sun sank lower. The wind cut through their wet clothes like they were wearing nothing at all. "My ranch is 2 miles north," he said, his teeth starting to chatter. "Town is 3 miles south. We will not make either before we freeze. There is a line shack a 1/4 mile west. Can you ride?" "I think so," Priscilla managed to say through her violent shivering. He lifted her onto the horse and climbed up behind her, wrapping his arms around her to take the reins. He kicked the horse into a fast trot, and Priscilla leaned back against his chest, too cold to care about propriety. She could feel him shaking too, his whole body trembling from the cold. The wet blanket around her shoulders did little good, but she clutched it anyway, desperate for any protection from the wind. The ride seemed to take forever and no time at all. Priscilla's awareness faded in and out. She registered the horse moving beneath them, the solid warmth of the man behind her despite his wet clothes, the burn of cold in her fingers and toes. Then they were stopping, and he was sliding down from the horse, pulling her down after him. A small wooden structure stood before them, barely more than a shed, but it had walls and a roof, and that was all that mattered. The man kicked the door open and carried her inside. It was dim and dusty, but blessedly out of the wind. He set her down on a narrow cot against one wall and immediately moved to the small iron stove in the corner. His hands shook as he opened it and checked inside. "Thank God," he muttered, finding kindling and wood already laid. He struck a match from a tin on the shelf, his fingers so stiff he dropped the first two before getting one lit. The kindling caught, and he carefully added larger pieces of wood, coaxing the fire to life. Once the flames were going steadily, he turned back to Priscilla. His face was pale, his lips tinged blue. "We need to get out of these wet clothes," he said bluntly. "We will die if we do not. I will turn my back while you undress. Wrap yourself in the dry blankets on that cot." Priscilla nodded, beyond embarrassment. Her fingers were so numb she could barely work the buttons of her coat. The man, true to his word, turned away and began stripping off his own soaked jacket and shirt. She fumbled with her clothes, her hands shaking too badly to be effective. After a long struggle, she managed to get her coat off, but the buttons of her dress defeated her completely. "I cannot," she whispered, tears of frustration freezing on her cheeks. "My hands will not work." The man turned back, his own shirt off, revealing a muscular chest and arms marked with old scars. He kept his eyes carefully on her face. "May I help you?" she nodded, having no choice. He knelt beside the cot and worked the buttons of her dress with fingers that shook, but were slightly more functional than her own. He kept his touch clinical, and his eyes averted, pulling the wet fabric away from her shoulders. When he reached her corset and chemise, both soaked through, he handed her a blanket. "Hold this up and remove the rest yourself as best you can," he said, and turned away again to remove his own boots and trousers. Priscilla managed to strip off the remaining wet undergarments beneath the blanket, her movements clumsy and slow. She wrapped herself in the dry wool blankets from the cot, all three of them, cocooning herself in their warmth. Across the small room, the man had wrapped himself in a blanket as well, leaving his wet clothes in a pile near the door. He fed more wood into the stove, building up the fire until heat began to radiate into the small space. "We need to get warm," he said, still not quite looking at her. "The fire will help, but we lost a lot of body heat in that water. Hypothermia can kill even after you are out of the cold." He paused, clearly uncomfortable. "The best way to warm up is to share body heat, but I understand if you would rather take your chances with the fire alone." Priscilla knew he was right. She had read about hypothermia in one of the medical journals the doctor in town sometimes shared with her. People could die hours after being rescued from cold water, their body temperature dropping too low to sustain life. She was already feeling drowsy, which she knew was a bad sign. The man had saved her life. She had to trust him now. "What is your name?" she asked. "Vincent Everett," he said. "I own the Double E Ranch north of here. I am Priscilla Bennett, the school teacher." She took a shaky breath. "Thank you for saving my life, Mr. Everett. And yes, I think we should share the blankets. I do not want to die in a lined shack after surviving the pond." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. He moved to the cot, keeping his own blanket wrapped around his waist, and sat down beside her. Carefully, he arranged the blankets so they were both covered, then put his arms around her and pulled her against his chest. The warmth of his skin against hers, even through the layer of blanket she kept between them, was immediately noticeable. She wrapped her arms around his torso and pressed close, seeking that vital heat. They sat like that in silence for a long time, both shivering, the fire crackling in the stove. Gradually, Priscilla felt sensation returning to her extremities, pins and needles that hurt but meant her circulation was recovering. Vincent's shivering eased as well, his breathing becoming deeper and more regular. The small room grew warmer. "How did you find me?" Priscilla finally asked, her voice muffled against his chest. "I was riding back to the ranch from town," Vincent said. "I heard the crack and splash. I looked over and saw the hole in the ice, saw you go under. I did not think, just kicked my horse over and dove in." He paused. "I have seen men die from cold water. It happens fast. There was no time to get help. You could have died too." "Yes," he agreed simply, "but I could not ride away and let you drown." Priscilla tilted her head back to look at his face. In the warm light from the stove, she could see him more clearly now. He looked to be in his late 20s, with strong features and those remarkable green eyes. His dark hair was starting to dry, curling slightly at the ends. There was a scar through his left eyebrow and another along his jaw. He had the weathered look of a man who spent his life outdoors, working hard, but there was something gentle in his eyes despite his rough appearance. "That was the bravest thing I have ever seen," she said softly. He looked uncomfortable with the praise. "Any decent man would have done the same." "I do not think that is true, but I am grateful it was you who heard me." She hesitated, then added, "I am sorry you had to ruin your clothes and risk your life for a foolish woman who thought she could walk across a frozen pond." "It was not foolish," Vincent said firmly. "That pond has been frozen solid for 2 weeks. Everyone has been crossing it. You had no way to know about the spring. I should have posted a warning. It is not your pond. It is on land that borders my ranch. I knew about the spring. I should have thought about it when the freeze came." He looked troubled. "I am glad I was there, but I am sorry you went through that terror." They fell silent again. Priscilla was acutely aware of the intimacy of their situation, wrapped together in blankets with nothing on, strangers an hour ago, but it did not feel wrong or frightening. Vincent held her with careful respect, his touch warm but not presumptuous. She felt safe with him, which was remarkable given the circumstances. "You live in town?" Vincent asked after a while. "Yes, in a boarding house run by Mrs. Fletcher. I teach at the schoolhouse on weekdays." Priscilla felt herself relaxing as warmth spread through her body. "I have been in Marfa for 3 years now. I came from San Antonio after my parents died. My aunt helped me get the teaching position. I know Mrs. Fletcher. She is a good woman. She will be worried when you do not return tonight." "Yes, and there is no way to send word. She will think something terrible happened to me." "Something terrible did happen to you," Vincent pointed out. "But you are alive, and that is what matters. We will stay here tonight where it is warm and safe, and I will take you back to town in the morning." "Your reputation will suffer, I am afraid." Priscilla had not thought about that, but he was right. Spending the night alone with a man, even in innocent circumstances, would damage her standing in the community. She could lose her teaching position. Mrs. Fletcher might ask her to leave the boarding house. The thought made her stomach sink, but she pushed it aside. "I will be alive to have a reputation," she said. "That is better than the alternative." "I will marry you," Vincent said suddenly, "if it comes to that. If you lose your position or your home because of this, it is my fault for bringing you here." Priscilla pulled back to stare at him in shock. "You saved my life. This is not your fault, And you cannot marry someone because of scandal. That is absurd. Is it? He met her eyes steadily. You saved my life, whether you know it or not. I have been alone a long time, Miss Bennett. Too long. Perhaps this is fate giving both of us a second chance. You do not even know me. I know you are brave enough to teach children on the frontier. I know you have a kind face and a strong spirit. That is more than many marriages start without here. He touched her cheek gently with one finger. I am not saying we must marry tomorrow. I am saying the offer stands if you need it. I am a man of my word. Priscilla did not know what to say. The offer was both insulting and touching at the same time. She could see in his eyes that he was sincere, but marriage to a stranger seemed like madness. Still, she filed the offer away in her mind. If her reputation was destroyed and she lost everything, it might be her only option. Let us worry about that tomorrow, she said finally. For now, I am simply grateful to be alive and warm. They settled back against the wall, wrapped in blankets and each other's warmth. The fire crackled. Outside, the wind howled and the temperature continued to drop. But inside the small line shack, they were safe. Priscilla felt her eyes growing heavy. The terror and cold had exhausted her completely. Vincent's arms around her felt secure and steady. Despite everything, despite the strangeness of the situation, she felt herself drifting towards sleep. Rest, Vincent murmured near her ear. I will keep watch and tend the fire. You are safe. And somehow, impossibly, she believed him. Priscilla let her eyes close and sleep claim her. She woke several times during the night, disoriented and cold despite the blankets. Each time, Vincent was awake, feeding the fire, keeping them warm. He would murmur soft reassurances and hold her closer until she drifted off again. By the time dawn light crept through the cracks in the walls, Priscilla felt almost human again, though her muscles ached and her throat was sore. Vincent was already up, dressed in his mostly dry clothes from the night before. They were stiff and wrinkled, but serviceable. He had hung her dress and coat near the stove to dry overnight, and they too were stiff but wearable. He turned his back while she dressed, struggling into the cold, rough fabric with fingers that still did not work quite right. "How do you feel?" he asked once she told him she was decent. "Like I fell through ice into freezing water and nearly died," Priscilla said, then managed a small smile. "But alive. Thank you again, Mr. Everett." "Vincent," he corrected. "I think we are past formalities, Miss Bennett." "Priscilla, then." He nodded and held out a canteen. "I only have water, but you should drink. We need to get you back to town and to the doctor. You need to be checked for any lasting effects of the cold." She drank gratefully, the water soothing her raw throat. Vincent banked the fire in the stove, leaving it safe, then opened the door. Bright sunlight streamed in, reflecting off a world turned white. Snow had fallen during the night, covering everything in a pristine blanket. Vincent's horse stood in the lean-to attached to the side of the shack, protected from the weather. Vincent saddled him efficiently and led him out, then helped Priscilla mount. She was stiff and sore, her movements awkward. Vincent swung up behind her and wrapped an arm around her waist to steady her, then turned the horse south toward town. The ride took nearly an hour in the snow. Priscilla dozed against Vincent's chest, her body still recovering from the ordeal. She was vaguely aware of the horse's steady gait, the warmth of Vincent behind her, the cold air on her face. When they finally reached the edge of Marfa, she roused herself to sit up straighter, knowing that appearances would matter now. The town was already awake and bustling despite the early hour. People stopped to stare as Vincent rode down the main street with Priscilla in front of him, both of them rumpled and exhausted. Priscilla saw Mrs. Fletcher standing outside the boarding house, her face going from worried to shocked to something harder to read. Vincent stopped the horse in front of the boarding house and dismounted, then helped Priscilla down. Her legs nearly buckled, and he steadied her with a hand on her elbow. "Mrs. Fletcher hurried over, her face pale. "Priscilla Bennett, where have you been? I was about to send for the sheriff. And Mr. Everett, what is the meaning of this?" "Miss Bennett fell through the ice on Miller's Pond yesterday afternoon," Vincent said calmly. "I pulled her out, but we were both soaked and the temperature was dropping. We took shelter in the line shack on the west boundary to avoid freezing to death. I kept the fire going all night and brought her back as soon as it was light." Mrs. Fletcher's eyes widened. "Through the ice? Oh, my dear girl, are you all right?" "I am alive because of Mr. Everett," Priscilla said, her voice hoarse. "He saved my life." A crowd was gathering now, drawn by the commotion. Priscilla saw the mayor, the banker, several of the mothers whose children she taught. She saw the calculations in their eyes, the speculation. Her reputation was crumbling by the second. "We need to get her to the doctor," Vincent said firmly. "She was in freezing water long enough to risk hypothermia. She needs to be examined." "I will take her, Mrs. Fletcher said, putting a protective arm around Priscilla. "Thank you for bringing her back safely, Mr. Everett." It was a dismissal, clear and firm. Vincent hesitated, his eyes meeting Priscilla's. She saw concern there and something else, something warmer. "If you need anything, Miss Bennett, you know where to find me." "Thank you, Vincent," she said softly, using his first name deliberately, "for everything." He tipped his hat to her, then to Mrs. Fletcher, and mounted his horse. The crowd parted to let him through, then closed in around Priscilla and Mrs. Fletcher, everyone talking at once, asking questions, making observations. Priscilla felt dizzy and overwhelmed. Mrs. Fletcher steered her firmly through the crowd and into the boarding house. Once inside, Mrs. Fletcher sat Priscilla down in the parlor and brought her hot tea and toast. "Tell me everything," she said quietly. Priscilla did, starting with her decision to cross the pond and ending with Vincent bringing her back to town. She left out the part about sharing blankets and body heat, but Mrs. Fletcher was no fool. She could read between the lines. "He is a good man," Mrs. Fletcher said when Priscilla finished. "Vincent Everett has a solid reputation in this town. He built that ranch from nothing after the war, works harder than any 3 men. If he says nothing improper happened, people will believe him." "Will they?" Priscilla asked tiredly. "Or will I lose my teaching position?" Mrs. Fletcher's silence was answer enough. Finally, she said, "We will take you to the doctor first, then we will see what happens." Perhaps when people hear the full story, they will be understanding. But Priscilla knew better. This was a small town with strict ideas about propriety. It did not matter that Vincent had saved her life, or that they had both nearly frozen to death. What mattered was that she had spent the night alone with an unmarried man. That was enough to ruin her. The doctor confirmed that Priscilla was recovering well from her ordeal. She had no frostbite, though she needed to rest and stay warm for the next few days. He gave her medicine for her sore throat and instructions to return if she developed any signs of fever or breathing problems. Then Mrs. Fletcher took her back to the boarding house and insisted she go to bed. Priscilla slept through most of the day, exhausted in body and spirit. When she woke, it was evening, and Mrs. Fletcher brought her soup and more tea, and she brought news. "The school board met this afternoon," Mrs. Fletcher said, her face grim. "They have decided to suspend you from your teaching position pending an investigation into what happened yesterday." Priscilla felt tears sting her eyes. "An investigation? What is there to investigate? I fell through the ice. Mr. Everett saved my life. We took shelter because we would have died otherwise. They want to be sure nothing inappropriate occurred," Mrs. Fletcher said, her tone making it clear what she thought of that reasoning. Reverend Josiah insists that a woman's virtue cannot be assumed just because she says nothing happened. He has been quite vocal about it. Priscilla knew Reverend Josiah. He was a stern, joyless man who believed women should be seen and not heard. He had disapproved of her teaching position from the start, believing women should stay home and tend to domestic duties. This was probably the opportunity he had been waiting for. "How long is the investigation supposed to take?" Priscilla asked. They did not say. "But in the meantime, you will not be teaching and you will not be paid." Mrs. Fletcher took her hand. "I am so sorry, my dear. You do not deserve this." Priscilla lay back against the pillows, feeling defeated. Without her teaching salary, she could not afford to pay for her room at the boarding house. Without her position, she had no real purpose in Marfa. She would have to return to San Antonio, to her aunt's small house, and hope to find work there. Or she could take Vincent up on his offer of marriage, binding herself to a man she had known for less than a day. Neither option seemed appealing. The next morning, feeling somewhat stronger, Priscilla dressed and went downstairs to face whatever came next. Mrs. Fletcher met her in the hallway with a strange expression on her face. "You have a visitor," she said. "Vincent Everett is in the parlor. He has been here since dawn, waiting for you to wake." Priscilla's heart did a strange flutter in her chest. She had been thinking about Vincent all night, replaying the moments in the lined shack, the feel of his arms around her, the sincerity in his eyes when he offered to marry her. She had told herself it was just gratitude, just the aftermath of trauma making her feel connected to him. But now, knowing he was here, she felt something more. She found him standing by the window, looking out at the snowy street. He turned when she entered, his face lighting up with obvious relief. "Priscilla," he said, crossing to her. "How are you feeling? I have been worried." "I am recovering," she said. "The doctor says I will be fine. Thank you for asking." "I heard about the school board's decision," Vincent said, his jaw tightening. "It is outrageous. You did nothing wrong." "Propriety does not care about right and wrong," Priscilla said tiredly. "Only about appearances." Vincent was quiet for a moment, studying her face. Then he said, "My offer still stands. If you will have me, I would be honored to make you my wife." Priscilla's breath caught. "Vincent, you do not have to do this. You barely know me." "I know enough," he said firmly. "I know you are intelligent and brave. I know you care about children and education. I know you have kind eyes and a strong spirit." He stepped closer. "I know that when I held you in that lined shack, it felt right in a way nothing has felt right for a very long time. I know I have not been able to stop thinking about you since." Priscilla felt heat rising to her cheeks. That could just be the circumstances. Shared trauma can create false feelings. "It could," Vincent agreed. "Or it could be something real. The only way to know is to give it a chance." He took her hands in his. "I am not asking you to love me right now. I am asking you to give me the opportunity to earn your love. Marry me, Priscilla. Come to the ranch and be my wife. If it does not work, if you are unhappy, I will give you a divorce and enough money to start over wherever you want. But give us a chance." It was the most romantic thing anyone had ever said to her, and also the most practical. Priscilla looked at their joined hands, then up at his face. Vincent Everett was not classically handsome, but he had good features and honest eyes. He had saved her life without hesitation. He was offering her not just rescue from scandal, but a true partnership. And beneath the practicality, she could feel the genuine emotion in his words. He wanted this. He wanted her, and God help her, she wanted him too, or at least wanted the chance to find out if what she felt was real. "Yes," she said softly. "I will marry you, Vincent Everett." His face transformed with a smile so bright it took her breath away. He lifted her hands to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently. "You will not regret this," he promised. I will spend every day trying to make you happy. I will hold you to that, Priscilla said, smiling despite her nerves. They were married 3 days later in a small ceremony at the church, with only Mrs. Fletcher and Vincent's ranch foreman as witnesses. Reverend Josiah performed the ceremony with obvious disapproval, but he performed it nonetheless. Vincent slipped a simple gold band on Priscilla's finger and kissed her gently when the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife. His lips were warm and soft, the kiss chaste but full of promise. After the ceremony, Vincent helped Priscilla onto his wagon, her few possessions packed in a trunk in the back. Mrs. Fletcher hugged her tightly, whispering, "Be happy, dear girl. You deserve it." Then Vincent climbed up beside her, took the reins, and they headed north toward the Double E Ranch. The ride took nearly 2 hours. Vincent pointed out landmarks along the way, talking about the ranch and the land. He owned 2,000 acres, he said, with a herd of about 300 cattle. He employed 6 ranch hands and his foreman, a man named Charlie who had been with him since the beginning. The ranch house was simple but sturdy, built by Vincent's own hands. "It is not fancy," he warned as they approached, "but it is comfortable and well built. I can add on to it if you want. Make it bigger, more like a proper home." "I am sure it will be fine," Priscilla said, though her stomach was fluttering with nerves. She was married now to a man she barely knew, heading to a home she had never seen. It should have terrified her. Instead, she felt a strange excitement building in her chest. The ranch house came into view over a rise, and Priscilla caught her breath. It was indeed simple, a sturdy wooden structure with a wide porch and a steep roof, but it sat in a beautiful location with views of rolling hills in every direction. Smoke curled from the chimney. Corrals and outbuildings were arranged nearby, everything neat and well maintained. Vincent pulled the wagon up to the front porch and set the brake, then came around to help Priscilla down. Before her feet touched the ground, he swept her up into his arms. "What are you doing?" she asked, startled. "Carrying my bride over the threshold," he said with a grin. "It is tradition." He carried her up the porch steps and through the front door into the house. Inside, it was warm and clean, simply furnished but comfortable. There was a main room with a stone fireplace, a kitchen area with a big iron stove, and 2 doors that presumably led to bedrooms. Vincent set her down gently. "Welcome home, Mrs. Everett," he said softly. "Mrs. Everett." Priscilla tried out the name in her mind and found she liked the sound of it. "Thank you, Mr. Everett." "Vincent," he corrected, touching her cheek. "Vincent," she repeated and smiled. He showed her around the house, which did not take long. The main room served as parlor and dining area. The kitchen was well stocked and functional. One bedroom was clearly Vincent's, with a large bed and masculine furnishings. The other was smaller, set up as a guest room but with a bed and dresser ready for use. "I thought you might want your own room," Vincent said, looking uncomfortable. "Until you are ready to share mine. I do not expect anything just because we are married. We will take things at your pace." Priscilla felt a rush of gratitude and affection for this thoughtful man. "Thank you," she said. "That means a great deal to me." They spent the rest of the day settling Priscilla's things into the guest room and preparing dinner together. Vincent was surprisingly competent in the kitchen, having lived alone for years. He cooked steaks and potatoes while Priscilla made biscuits from his well-stocked pantry. They ate at the simple wooden table, talking about their lives and learning about each other. Vincent told her about growing up in Missouri, the son of a farmer. He had fought in the war, though he did not say much about that, except that it had been terrible and he was glad it was over. After the war, he had come west looking for a fresh start. He had worked as a ranch hand for several years, saving every penny, until he had enough to buy land and start his own place. He had been ranching on his own for 7 years now, building the Double E into a successful operation. Priscilla told him about her childhood in San Antonio, the daughter of a shopkeeper and a seamstress. She had always loved reading and learning, and had been fortunate enough to attend a school run by nuns who recognized her intelligence and encouraged her education. When her parents died in a typhoid outbreak, her aunt had helped her get the teaching certificate and the position in Marfa. She had been happy there, fulfilling work and a quiet life, until the pond had changed everything. "You regret it?" Vincent asked softly. "Marrying me instead of fighting to get your position back." Priscilla considered the question carefully. "No," she said finally. "I loved teaching and I am sad to lose it, but I do not regret marrying you. I think this might be the start of something good." Vincent's smile was warm and genuine. "I think so too." That night, Priscilla lay in the narrow bed in the guest room, listening to the sounds of the ranch settling around her. She could hear cattle lowing in the distance, the wind in the eaves, the crackle of the dying fire in the main room. It was strange and new, but not frightening. Through the thin wall, she could hear Vincent moving around in his own room, preparing for bed. She thought about him, this quiet, strong man who had saved her life and offered her a new one. She thought about his green eyes and his gentle hands, the way he had held her in the lined shack, the careful respect he showed her now. She fell asleep with a smile on her face, feeling more hopeful than she had in days. The next weeks passed in a blur of adjustment and discovery. Priscilla learned the rhythms of ranch life, the early mornings and hard work, the satisfaction of accomplishing physical tasks. Vincent taught her to ride properly, spending patient hours helping her learn to control a horse. She helped with cooking and cleaning, but also began to take over the ranch accounts, discovering she had a talent for numbers and organization that Vincent appreciated. They worked side by side, learning each other's habits and preferences. Vincent was an early riser, up before dawn to see to the cattle and horses. Priscilla learned to wake with him and have coffee ready when he came in for breakfast. She discovered he liked his eggs scrambled, and his bacon crispy, that he read the newspaper cover to cover every evening, that he had a habit of humming while he worked. He learned that she needed quiet time with her books in the afternoon, that she had a weakness for peppermint candy, that she braided her hair when she was thinking hard about something. They talked constantly, sharing stories and opinions, debating everything from politics to philosophy. Vincent was far better educated than Priscilla had expected, having read widely during his solitary years on the ranch. He valued her intelligence and sought her input on ranch decisions. She found herself genuinely interested in the business of ranching, in breeding programs and water rights and market prices. The ranch hands treated her with cautious respect at first, unsure of this new woman in their midst. But Priscilla won them over with her cooking, her fair treatment, and her willingness to learn. Charlie, the foreman, became a particular friend, a gruff older man who had fought alongside Vincent in the war and followed him west afterward. He clearly cared deeply about Vincent, and seemed pleased that his boss had finally found someone to share his life with. Through it all, Vincent remained the perfect gentleman. He never pushed Priscilla for physical intimacy beyond occasional chaste kisses on her cheek or forehead. He let her set the pace of their relationship, content to simply be near her, to talk and work alongside her. But Priscilla could see the want in his eyes sometimes, quickly hidden, the way he would catch himself before touching her too familiarly. She knew he desired her, and the knowledge sent warmth curling through her belly, because the truth was, she desired him too, more and more each day. She found herself watching him work, admiring the flex of his muscles under his shirt, the competent strength of his hands. She remembered the feel of his body against hers in the lined shack, the way his arms had made her feel safe and cherished. She wanted that again, wanted more. But she did not know how to tell him, did not know how to bridge the gap between their careful courtesy and something deeper. The answer came one evening about 6 weeks after their wedding. They were sitting by the fire after dinner, Priscilla reading while Vincent repaired a bridle. Outside, a winter storm howled, coating the world in fresh snow. The house was warm and cozy, the fire crackling pleasantly. It was a scene of such domestic contentment that Priscilla felt her heart swell with unexpected emotion. "Vincent," she said softly, closing her book. He looked up, his hands stilling on the leather. "Yes, I am ready," she said simply. He did not pretend to misunderstand. His eyes darkened, his expression intense. "Are you certain?" "I am certain." She stood and crossed to him, her heart pounding. "I do not want to sleep alone anymore. I want to be your wife in every way." Vincent set aside the bridle and rose to his feet, towering over her. For a moment, he just looked at her, his green eyes searching her face. Then he cupped her cheek in one calloused hand and lowered his mouth to hers. The kiss was nothing like the chaste pecks they had shared before. It was deep and hungry, full of 6 weeks of restrained desire. Priscilla gasped against his mouth and he took advantage, his tongue sliding against hers. She melted into him, her hands clutching his shoulders, her body pressing close. She could feel the hard length of him against her stomach, could feel his heart pounding against her chest. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Vincent rested his forehead against hers. "I want you so much," he whispered roughly. "I have wanted you since the moment I pulled you from that water, but I need you to be sure, Priscilla. I cannot make love to you and then have you regret it." "I will not regret it," she promised. "I want you too, Vincent. I want to be with you, truly be your wife." He swept her up into his arms, just as he had carried her over the threshold and carried her to his bedroom. He laid her on the big bed with infinite gentleness, then lit the lamp on the bedside table, turning it low so the room was bathed in soft golden light. "I want to see you," he said, his voice husky. "All of you." Priscilla nodded, her mouth suddenly dry. She had never been with a man before, had only the vaguest idea of what to expect. But she trusted Vincent. She knew he would be gentle with her. He undressed her slowly, his hands reverent as he worked the buttons of her dress. He peeled away each layer of clothing, pausing to kiss newly exposed skin, making her shiver with sensation. When she was finally bare before him, he sat back and just looked at her, his expression one of such open admiration that she felt no shame in her nakedness. "You are so beautiful," he murmured. "So perfect." Then he stood and undressed himself, and it was Priscilla's turn to stare. She had seen his bare chest in the lined shack, but the rest of him was new. He was magnificent, all hard muscle and bronzed skin, marked with scars that told stories of a hard life. And he was very obviously aroused, his manhood thick and ready. He joined her on the bed, pulling her into his arms, and kissed her again. His hands roamed her body, learning her curves, finding sensitive places that made her gasp and arch. She explored him in turn, running her hands over his chest and back, fascinated by the feel of him, so different from her own soft curves. When he finally moved over her and joined their bodies, there was a brief moment of pain that made her tense. Vincent stilled immediately, his face strained with the effort of holding back. "Breathe," he whispered. "Just breathe, sweetheart. The pain will pass." She did as he said, forcing her muscles to relax, and gradually the burning sensation eased. Vincent moved slowly, carefully, giving her time to adjust. And then, impossibly, the discomfort transformed into pleasure. She began to move with him, finding a rhythm, gasping at the sensations building inside her. Vincent watched her face, his own expression tender and fierce at once, clearly holding back his own release until she found hers. When she finally shattered, crying out his name, he let himself go, thrusting deep and groaning his completion. They clung to each other in the aftermath, both trembling, both overcome. "I love you," Vincent whispered into her hair, the words seemingly pulled from deep inside him. "God help me, Priscilla, but I love you." Tears sprang to Priscilla's eyes, but they were happy tears. "I love you too," she whispered back, and realized it was absolutely true. Somewhere between falling through the ice and this perfect moment, she had fallen completely in love with her unexpected husband. They made love twice more that night, learning each other's bodies, discovering what gave pleasure. By the time they finally fell asleep, tangled together in Vincent's big bed, Priscilla felt transformed. She was no longer the school teacher from town, no longer the woman who had almost died in a frozen pond. She was Mrs. Vincent Everett, rancher's wife, beloved and cherished. Their life together deepened and strengthened over the following months. Winter gave way to spring, and spring to summer. Priscilla threw herself into ranch life, tending a large garden, helping with the branding, even learning to deliver calves when necessary. She discovered a strength in herself she had not known existed, a capability for hard physical work that left her tired but satisfied. Vincent was an attentive and loving husband, never missing an opportunity to show his affection. He brought her wildflowers from the range, sang to her while they worked, made love to her with a passion that never dimmed. They talked and laughed, argued occasionally but always made up, built a partnership based on mutual respect and genuine love. In late summer, Priscilla realized she was pregnant. She told Vincent one evening after dinner, and his whoop of joy could probably be heard in town. He picked her up and spun her around, kissing her face all over, his hands gentle on her still flat belly. "A baby," he kept saying, wonder in his voice. "We are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" Priscilla asked, though his reaction made the answer obvious. "Happy does not begin to cover it," Vincent said fervently. "You have given me everything, Priscilla. A home, a purpose, love. And now a child. I am the luckiest man alive." The pregnancy was difficult at times, with morning sickness that lasted well into the afternoon and exhaustion that left Priscilla napping more than working. But Vincent was endlessly patient and supportive, taking over her chores without complaint, bringing her ginger tea and crackers, rubbing her aching back in the evenings. He read parenting books and consulted with the doctor in town, determined to be prepared for their child's arrival. As her belly swelled with their baby, Priscilla reflected on how much her life had changed in less than a year. She had gone from lonely spinster schoolteacher to beloved wife and expectant mother. She had a home she adored, work that fulfilled her, and a man who loved her more than she had ever dreamed possible. All because of one terrifying moment on a frozen pond and a cowboy who had not hesitated to save her. Their son was born on a cold February morning, almost exactly a year after Priscilla had fallen through the ice. The labor was long and hard, but Vincent stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand, wiping her face with cool cloths, whispering encouragement and love. When the baby finally emerged with a lusty cry, the doctor laid him on Priscilla's chest, and she fell instantly, completely in love for the second time in her life. "He is perfect," Vincent said, his voice thick with tears as he stroked the baby's downy head. "Absolutely perfect. Just like his mother." They named him Thomas Charles Everett after Vincent's father and Charlie the foreman. He was a healthy, hungry baby with a shock of dark hair and eyes that would eventually turn green like his father's. Vincent was besotted from the first moment, spending hours just watching the baby sleep, holding him carefully, singing to him in a soft voice that made Priscilla's heart melt. Life settled into a new rhythm with the baby. Priscilla was exhausted but joyful, learning to nurse and change diapers and soothe a crying infant. Vincent helped whenever he could, getting up for night feedings even though he had to be up at dawn for ranch work, rocking Thomas when he was fussy, changing dirty diapers without complaint. Charlie and the ranch hands were frequent visitors, all of them charmed by the little boy. As Thomas grew from infant to toddler, Priscilla and Vincent's love continued to deepen. They faced challenges together: a drought that threatened the cattle, a bad winter that killed some of their herd, the constant hard work of running a ranch. But they faced it all as partners, supporting each other, loving each other through good times and bad. When Thomas was 3, Priscilla became pregnant again. This time it was twins, a boy and a girl, who arrived healthy and screaming in early fall. They named them Daniel and Sarah, and suddenly the ranch house was overflowing with children and noise and joy. Vincent built an addition to the house, adding 2 more bedrooms and a larger kitchen, giving his growing family more space. The town had long since forgotten about the scandal of Priscilla spending the night in a line shack with Vincent. She was simply Mrs. Everett now, the respectable rancher's wife with a growing family. She occasionally went to town for supplies or church, but she was happiest on the ranch, surrounded by her husband and children, working the land she had come to love. One winter evening, when Thomas was 5 and the twins were 2, Vincent and Priscilla sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. The children were asleep inside, worn out from a day of playing in the snow. It was cold, but they were bundled in blankets, content to sit together in the peaceful evening. "You ever think about that day?" Vincent asked quietly. "The day you fell through the ice?" "Sometimes," Priscilla admitted. "It was the most terrifying moment of my life. But also the most important in a way. If I had not fallen, if you had not saved me, none of this would exist. We would not be married. Our children would not be here." "I think we would have found each other eventually," Vincent said, pulling her closer. "Fate was determined to bring us together." The pond was just its way of making it happen quickly. Priscilla smiled and leaned into his warmth. "Perhaps you are right, but I am grateful for how it happened, even though it was frightening. I am grateful for every moment that led me to you." "I love you, Priscilla Everett," Vincent said, kissing her temple. "More than life itself. You saved me as surely as I saved you that day. You gave me a reason to live beyond just working and surviving. You gave me joy and love and family." "And you gave me the same," Priscilla whispered. "You are my heart, Vincent, my home, my everything." They sat together as the stars came out, wrapped in each other and their love, their children sleeping safely inside, their ranch peaceful around them. It was not the life Priscilla had planned for herself all those years ago. But it was so much better than anything she could have imagined. The years continued to pass in a blur of hard work and happiness. Thomas grew into a strong, intelligent boy who loved the ranch and the cattle, already talking about taking over the operation one day. Daniel was more adventurous, always getting into mischief, while Sarah was quiet and thoughtful, with her mother's love of books and learning. Vincent and Priscilla added one more child to their family when the twins were 4, another girl they named Elizabeth after Priscilla's mother. The ranch prospered under Vincent's careful management and Priscilla's organizational skills. They expanded their herd, bought more land, built a better house for the foreman and his family. Charlie eventually married and had children of his own, and the 2 families became intertwined, their children growing up together, running wild across the ranch. Priscilla never went back to teaching in an official capacity. But she educated all the ranch children, setting up a small schoolhouse in one of the outbuildings and teaching them reading, writing, arithmetic, and history. She found she loved this work even more than her former position, able to adapt her teaching to each child's needs without the restrictions of a formal school board. Vincent supported her in this, as he supported her in everything, believing deeply in the power of education. He often joined the lessons when he could, learning alongside the children, amazed at what he had missed in his limited frontier education. Their children and the ranch hands' children all benefited from Priscilla's teaching, growing up literate and knowledgeable in a place where education was rare. When Thomas was 15, a strong young man already taking on significant responsibilities on the ranch, Priscilla was surprised to find herself pregnant again. She was 40 years old and had thought her childbearing years were behind her. But Vincent was delighted, and their older children were excited at the prospect of a new baby. The pregnancy was harder than her previous ones, her body older and less resilient. Vincent worried constantly, hovering over her, trying to get her to rest more. But Priscilla was stubborn, continuing to work and teach until the doctor insisted she take it easier in the final months. Their last child, a boy they named William, was born healthy and perfect on a warm spring morning. Vincent held him with the same wonder he had shown with Thomas 16 years earlier, and Priscilla felt her heart overflow with gratitude for this unexpected gift. Their family was complete now, 5 children ranging from newborn to teenager, a house full of love and laughter and life. As the years turned into decades, Vincent and Priscilla watched their children grow and flourish. Thomas took over more and more of the ranch operations, eventually becoming a partner in the business. He married a sweet girl from town and built a house on the northern section of the ranch, starting a family of his own. Daniel went off to college in San Antonio, studying engineering, but came back to the ranch every summer, never losing his love for the land. Sarah became a teacher like her mother, taking over the ranch school and expanding it to serve children from neighboring ranches as well. Elizabeth showed a talent for horses, breeding and training some of the finest stock in the region. And William, the baby, grew into a thoughtful, artistic boy who loved to draw and paint, capturing the beauty of the ranch and the surrounding landscape in stunning detail. Through it all, Vincent and Priscilla remained as devoted to each other as they had been in those early days. They still worked side by side, still talked and laughed together, still made love with the passion of newlyweds despite their aging bodies. They had built something remarkable together, not just a successful ranch but a true home, a legacy of love and family that would continue long after they were gone. On a cold December evening, nearly 40 years after Priscilla had fallen through the ice, they sat together on the porch of their expanded ranch house, wrapped in blankets against the winter chill. Their grandchildren were inside with their parents, the house full of noise and warmth and family. It was Christmas time and everyone had gathered at the ranch to celebrate together. "You remember this day?" Vincent asked, taking Priscilla's hand. 40 years ago today you fell through the ice." "How could I forget?" Priscilla said, smiling at him. "The day my life changed forever. The day I met you. The day I realized what I had been missing," Vincent said, lifting her hand to his lips and kissing it gently. "I was just existing before you, Priscilla. You taught me how to truly live." "We taught each other," Priscilla corrected. "You showed me strength and courage. You gave me a home and a family and a love I never dreamed possible." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. Inside, they could hear their children and grandchildren laughing, could smell the dinner cooking, could feel the warmth of family all around them. This was what they had built together, brick by brick, day by day, year by year, a life of meaning and purpose and deep, abiding love. "I would do it all again," Vincent said softly. "Jump into that freezing water, risk everything, just for the chance to be with you." "And I would fall through that ice 1,000 times," Priscilla replied, tears of happiness in her eyes, "knowing you would be there to pull me out, knowing it would lead me here to this life to you." Vincent pulled her close and kissed her, a kiss still full of passion and promise even after 4 decades together. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling. "I love you, Mrs. Everett," Vincent whispered. "I love you too, Mr. Everett," Priscilla whispered back. "Always and forever." They went inside together, hand in hand, to join their family. The house was warm and bright, full of the people they loved most in the world, the legacy of that one terrifying, wonderful day when fate had brought them together in the most unexpected way. And as they sat down to dinner surrounded by children and grandchildren, Vincent and Priscilla looked at each other across the crowded table and smiled, knowing that every moment of their life together had been a gift. From that first desperate rescue to this perfect evening, they had lived a love story for the ages. A story that began with ice and fear and cold water, but blossomed into warmth and joy, and a love that would endure long after they were both gone from this earth. Their story became legend in Marfa, Texas. The schoolteacher who fell through the ice and the cowboy who saved her, who built a life and a family and a legacy together. Young couples would point to them as proof that true love existed, that it could be found in the most unexpected moments. And Vincent and Priscilla, growing old together on their beloved ranch, never tired of telling their story to anyone who asked. Because it was a story worth telling, a reminder that sometimes the worst moments of our lives can lead to the very best, that courage and kindness can change everything. That love, true love, is worth any risk, any sacrifice. And that happily ever after is not just something that happens in fairy tales, but something real people can build together, one day at a time, with patience and commitment and an open heart. Vincent lived to be 82 years old, still working the ranch he loved until the very end. When he finally passed peacefully in his sleep, Priscilla was beside him, holding his hand, whispering her love. She followed him 3 years later, also peaceful, also surrounded by family. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch, their graves marked with simple stones that bore their names and the dates that mattered most. The day they met, and the day they married, forever linked by that moment when a cowboy heard a splash and dove in without hesitation to save a woman he did not even know yet. Their children continued the ranch, and their grandchildren after them, carrying on the legacy Vincent and Priscilla had built. The Double E Ranch prospered through generations, a testament to the love and hard work of its founders. And on cold winter nights, when the wind howled and the fire crackled, the family still told the story of how it all began, with ice and water and a cowboy brave enough to risk everything for love. It was a story of the Wild West, of harsh conditions and hard living, of danger and survival. But more than that, it was a love story, pure and simple. The kind of love that transcends circumstances, that builds something beautiful and lasting out of chaos and fear. The kind of love that saves not just lives, but souls. The kind of love that endures forever, written in the land itself, in the family that sprang from it, in the memories passed down through generations. And if you visit Marfa, Texas even today, you can still see the ranch, still thriving, still beautiful. You can visit the graves on the hill and read the simple inscription beneath Vincent and Priscilla's names. He saved her life. She saved his heart. Together they built a legacy of love. It was the perfect epitaph for a perfect love story, born in a moment of terror on a frozen pond, grown through years of partnership and devotion, enduring long after both had passed into legend. The cowboy and the schoolteacher, forever together, forever in love, forever an example of what two people can build when they choose each other, support each other, and love each other with everything they have. Their story proved that true love does exist, that it can be found in the most unexpected places, that it can overcome any obstacle. It proved that sometimes the best things in life come from the worst moments, that crisis can lead to opportunity, that falling through ice can lead to falling in love. And it proved that happily ever after is not the end of the story, but the beginning of the greatest adventure of all, the adventure of building a life together with the person you love more than anything in the world. Vincent and Priscilla Everett lived that adventure fully, passionately, joyfully. They faced hardships and celebrated triumphs. They raised children and built a business. They worked and loved and laughed together for 45 years, creating a partnership that was the envy of everyone who knew them. And when their time on Earth was done, they left behind not just a successful ranch and a large family, but a legacy of love that continues to inspire to this day. Because that is what true love does. It inspires. It endures. It transforms ordinary lives into something extraordinary. It takes a terrifying accident on a frozen pond and turns it into the beginning of the greatest love story the Wild West had ever seen. And long after the players are gone, long after the ranch has passed to new generations, long after the world has changed beyond recognition, the story remains. The story of a cowboy who heard a splash and dove in without hesitation. The story of a woman who fell through ice and found her soulmate. The story of a love that conquered all, endured all, and proved that sometimes the best things in life are worth risking everything for. That was the story of Vincent and Priscilla Everett, and it was a story with the happiest possible ending. One written not in grand gestures or dramatic moments, but in 45 years of daily choosing each other, supporting each other, loving each other through every season of life. It was a story of the Wild West, yes, but more importantly, it was a story of the human heart and its infinite capacity for love.